Hey, friend. Welcome to the Human Design Diaries, a Soul Aligned Sisters podcast. Here we will delve into the fascinating world of human design. In this series, we'll cover the basics, dive deep into the gates and channels, and share plenty of laughs and magic. Join us as we explore how human design can guide you to live a more soul aligned life. Get ready for insightful conversations full of practical tips and insights to help you on your journey. Let's explore.
Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Human Design Diaries. Today, I'm so excited. We have a guest visitor. This is Sarah Leverett with Intuitive Empowerment. Sarah, can you do us a favor and introduce yourself to the people?
Absolutely. Thank you for having me. Yeah, I'm Sarah Leverett. I have a business called Intuitive Empowerment here in Chattanooga, Tennessee. And I focus my work in two areas, self-exploration and then community care. And everything that I do is grounded in the magic of Mother Nature. So I'm a practicing Celtic pagan witch, and that infuses the modalities that I offer. So hypnosis, tarot, mentorship. Um, and yeah, outside of that, I am a cat mom, and I love finding peace on my yoga mat. And I'm a reader, I'm a writer. Um, I think writing this year has been such a lovely addition to my practice. And so thank you for having me. I'm glad to be here.
I think, Sarah, you were the first person to take me through a past life regression.
Same.
And,
Me too.
oh, really?
Uh-huh. Yep.
And I think that was maybe 3 or 4 years ago, something like that. I still think about that.
Wow.
It's still present for me.
So,
I think about it often, actually. So yeah, I don't know if you talked about past life regressions, but that is something that you have done in the past, and you are incredibly gifted at it.
oh, thank you. Yeah, past life regression is definitely in that bucket of hypnosis and
Mm.
something that I still offer. And when I think back on my journey, my first past life regression is what solidified, wanting to be an entrepreneur and wanting to work in the space that I'm currently working in. So it's very much so a powerful modality.
Very cool.
Yeah.
Well, we didn't bring you to talk about past life regression, although maybe we should talk about that sometime. I think that would be a cool topic. What
Yeah.
I wanted to talk to you about today is your journey with human design. So Sarah, for all of us watching, is a projector type. And I actually shared your chart with you early on. I think we did a trade, right? I did your chart and you did my past life regression. And so I really just wanted to hear from you a little bit about your journey with human design. How did you first hear about it?
Yeah, so I remember this was when I was still living in New Orleans, and I it's wild how certain days you remember so clearly. My car was in the shop, and everything in New Orleans was super walkable, which is something that I really miss about being there. And I was walking from the house that I was living in to the car shop and to check on my car. And I had Ashley Sondergaard's Yoga Magic podcast in my earbuds. And that particular day, she happened to have Lauren Armstrong on the podcast. And Lauren was just doing a very high level, what is human design? These are the five types. And, encouraging folks to like pause the podcast, pull your own chart up, like a very introductory type of episode. And yeah, I just remember doing that, right? Like pausing the episode as she was talking about the types, plugging in my birth info. Um, and I think I remember a flood of relief in my body, when I heard that projectors, aren't meant to keep up with
Mm-hmm.
the generators of the world. And that while we are maybe fewer than the whole, there are other folks out there like me who feel that so deeply in their bones that we're not meant to keep up with the same pace. Right. And I think now I also am looking at that through the lens of like none of us are meant to keep up with the pace of capitalism, right? But
Mm-hmm.
and more so than that, like even just within communities or even within more balanced places, even then we're still perhaps a bit um, slower in the best way. And yeah, I remember just being brought to tears that day, feeling seen. And I think the best tools and the best modalities, that's what they do, right? It's a mirror. I'm very big on not letting your natal chart or your human design chart or a tarot reading tell you who you are,
Mm-hmm.
right? And so I think the best modalities are the ones where it's like, oh, I've always known this about myself. I've always felt this about myself. And now I have a word, now I have language, now I have a mirror that can reflect this back to me. And so, yeah, I think at the time I was working 60 plus hours a week in the nonprofit space. Um, this would have been pre 2020. Um, and I remember hearing the advice of like ideally how little projectors would be working. And I remember thinking to myself, like, that's impossible. That will never happen. But I can take a step in that direction, right? I can slow down. It was almost like I had gotten this little energetic permission slip to be a bit more of who I knew that I was. Yeah, and then of course, how it is to catch that rabbit hole fever, and so as soon as I heard that one introductory podcast on human design, I wanted to listen and absorb as much as I could and learn as much as I could. And I would say my understanding, the embodiment, and even the critiques, right, have come up along the way. But I'm forever grateful for feeling seen, that permission slip to slow down, that permission slip to not keep up with the world around me. Yeah. I just more than anything, just relief is what I remember feeling when I first read about being a projector.
I love that. And I've had some clients along the way who are projectors who I think had a similar experience where it's like, oh, that makes so much sense. Oh my God. Like, and they're like really ready to like embrace that part of them. It's like they got, like you said, they got the language for something that they already knew to be true. And then there are some projectors who I feel like struggle a little bit more around letting go, some of the conditioning, letting go of the idea of needing to push, letting go of the idea of like hustling to make something happen, which is not, we would say is not the best way to go about using your energy as a projector, right? Because it's just you don't have as much, and pushing expends more than maybe what you realize. What I'm curious for you though, was there parts of about being a projector that you struggled to embrace, or did it really feel for you like I'm going to surrender to this?
Hmm. A few things come to mind. One thing on the top of my mind is just I think one of my core wounds, but also maybe gifts, is this place in me where my inner child feels misunderstood and wants to be special or different or stand out and like individualize myself. And so the first thing coming to mind in that struggle was honestly hearing all five types and being like, oh, well, why couldn't I be a reflector and be even more special, right? Or, or why could even a manifester, right? Like someone who can initiate and create so freely. Um, and so I think, and I don't really think about the Enneagram very often, but that's coming to mind. I'm a 4 on the Enneagram, and that kind of that misunderstood wanting to like individuate and be so, because I feel so different a lot of the time, I want proof, right? I want to be in that 1% or that 9%, right? So that was one piece that was difficult. And I could see, now I feel like I'm speaking to generators. I could see that even more so, with a generator, right? To kind
Mhm.
of the percentages of the breakdown of us all kind of was hard for me um, to process. And I don't even know that I find that breakdown super helpful.
Mhm.
I think that's one critique. It's like, I don't know how we could actually really know that. And so,
Right.
so that was something. And then I would say the invitation piece was difficult to me, especially because it felt at odds with what I was trying to integrate with astrology. In astrology, I have a ton of fire. I'm an Aries cardinal sign, right? So a lot of that language is like, go first, get out there, be the spark that starts the fire. And so holding that with, wait a second, I need to slow down, I need to wait for an invitation. That was an interesting experiment, right? Of what is the harmony between these two parts of myself. And I think where I personally found a path within human design was realizing, like, oh, I can use my spark and my cardinal fire for like learning and reading and writing and being creative. And in those spaces where I'm not feeling the grind and the push and the force, like really looking at my day and like the potential of the time that I have and saying, like, okay, if I'm only going to work and grind and do 3 to 4 hours, how do I spend this other time when I'm this fiery, go-getter, Aries leader type of energy too? And so for me, I found that path again with like learning, study, listening. And I really had to deconstruct and decondition that, like, just because there's not a product coming from that time that's tangible, that doesn't make it any less valuable, right? And as an Aries, that self, right? Energy, there's an investment in self that is innately worthy. Um, and it took me a long time, that's been probably 6 years ago now that I first heard about human design, and I'm still untangling that. I've come a very long way, but I'm still untangling that worthiness of like reading is just as valuable, writing is just as valuable, learning something new, taking a class, all of those things um, are productive, right, in my own way. And so yeah, I think that wanting to be even more special and then trying to wrap my head around the invitation. I think those were the hardest things there.
Yeah, the invitation I feel like trips people up.
Mhm.
And especially I find projectors generally like, so I don't know all projectors, right? I know the projectors that I know. But I find, they have so much wisdom to share. Like I often tell people and they validate that this is true for them, that like they kind of came in as an old soul, right? They just hold this like depth of wisdom that is just wanting to be shared, right? And they know, I think, intuitively that they're here to guide and lead. And the question then becomes like, who are you here to guide and lead? Because you're not here for everyone, you're here for certain people. And so the invitation is how you know that those are the people who you are here to lead, right? But one of the things that I talk about a little bit with projectors who struggle a little bit on this front of waiting for the invitation, um, is that, you can like kind of do the things that you talked about, right? You can tell people what you're interested in. You can, you know, uh, put it out there, right? But pay attention to, reflect backwards to the times where you were invited. How did those experiences go versus the times where you pushed, right? That you were the initiator, you were the one who was trying to make something happen. Um, has that been true for you too, as far as your experience? If you kind of like reflect backwards on what it was like, waiting for invitations, because I find that projectors can see in the past where they have been invited into situations. Have Are you able to notice that in your own experience, the difference between being invited into situations versus kind of initiating them or pushing them forward?
Yeah, it took me some time to not be so literal with that and to
Hmm.
reflect and feel into it a little bit more, because sometimes the invitation is a bit more subtle, right? We're not always going to get like an invitation literally in the mail.
Right.
They come do the thing. So for me, the way that I feel when I have pushed or forced or not been listening or feeling, is it's almost like I'm trying to open the door and someone may open it and see what I've got going on, and then it feels like this just like energetic door gets slammed in my face. Um, and then the other thing coming up around that is like the invitation paired with that needing to feel seen and recognized, because sometimes the invitation is there, right? Someone may think that they want your advice or your guidance or your skill, and to be in those spaces as someone trying to integrate, okay, I'm waiting for an invitation, now I have one. It can still feel like that energetic door is being slammed if there's that skip step of like, wait, am I really seen in this space? Am I really
Mm,
heard in this space? Um, and not just for what I can offer, but like who I am. And when I reflect back on my life, there have been times where I've had that invitation, and maybe I didn't have to force, or maybe I didn't have to grind to get there, but being there still wasn't feeling like I was fully seen and heard and recognized. So it's like a both and with that. And sometimes the invitation is a bit more subtle, and I think that's why it's super important for us to be in our bodies and learn also how to implement, strategy and authority too. Yeah, but there have definitely been plenty of times where I've pushed and forced and found myself in situations where it did not feel good to be there. I wasn't
mhm.
seen, or I burnt myself out. Um, so yeah, absolutely.
So it sounds like, what I might take away from what you just shared is like how important it is to really sense in your body if the invitation is correct for you. And that does play out through authority. In human design, authority, a strategy kind of tells us like how do we engage our energy, and authority tells us how do we know if this is the right thing for us and if this is the right time for us, if we're with the right people, etc. Like what is our yes or our no? And I think one of the ways that I kind of divert a little bit from like the human design system is that I think we all have the capability of feeling a yes or no in our body. And so even if your authority is, say for example, like you're a self-projected projector, like you're here to sort of hear, you need to hear yourself talk to find the clarity, there's still something that's happening internally in your body that is a sense of a yes or a no for this thing. And like, if I was going to tell anybody to do anything, I would say that is like the most important thing that we all need to figure out, whether you know your human design or not, whether you're into any of this kind of stuff or not. Like, finding our yes and our no in our body is really, really important, especially because we live unsustainably in an unsustainable world. And so if everything is always a yes, right, which I think is kind of how people operate, is like you say yes when you really mean no, like there, you can't find a pathway to sustainability that way, right? We have to be willing to honor our no's. And so even if you do receive the invitation, the discernment about, does this actually feel like a yes to you, is super important, and I think can be a struggle when you're waiting for an invitation. Like, you know, you're supposed to be waiting. You have so much, right? You spent all your time like getting the certifications and learning all the things, and you have so much wisdom to share, and you're sitting there waiting. Like, the first person who comes along, you might be inclined to say, okay, yeah, like this is it, right? But the discernment piece is super important.
1000%. Yeah, I'm glad that you expanded on that point of how important it is for all of us to be in our bodies when we're making decisions. No matter where your authority is coming from. I agree with that. I think that should be a baseline for any modality that we're utilizing. We have to be in our bodies, and we have to be discerning, period. No matter what type you are, or what modality you're using, or what teacher you're working with, or
Mm-hmm.
therapist, or job, or whatever it is.
Mm-hmm.
Being in our bodies and using discernment is what is going to save us. Um, and so, yeah, I appreciate that point of view. Um, yeah, and because waiting for an invitation asks us to be patient and asks us to be a bit more still and to slow down, you're absolutely right. When you finally get a, hey, will you share your point of view on this? Or, hey, will you teach me this? Or, hey, I could use some advice. It could be super, super tempting to just latch onto that from a mental, space, and completely miss that discernment piece of, is this a good fit? Am I going to feel seen? Do I feel recognized? And yeah, it takes time. It takes time to practice that. It takes time saying yes to something that your body was telling you no about. And so there's also like grace and compassion and
Mm-hmm.
forgiveness and releasing perfectionism. And this is meant to be an experiment. This is meant
Mm-hmm.
to be something that we're practicing, not something that we're meant to learn about on Monday and then be able to implement on Tuesday.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Whenever we do miss our body's cue, and whenever we do force or grind, or whenever we forget our discernment. Yeah, we also have to be willing to forgive ourselves, stay with your body, right? Feel what you need to feel about that, whether it's guilt or sadness or grief or whatever it is, and then start again, begin again, try again, practice it again. Um, and also, part of being discerning is, well, actually, you know what? That exact piece of this advice, this exact piece of this experiment or this modality isn't for me. So there's
Right.
a wisdom in going, I tried it, I
Mm-hmm.
experimented with it, I practiced it, and it's just not for me. So I'm going to choose another tool. Um,
I love that, because I really do. This goes back to your first comment about human design being a mirror. That is really how I approach sharing it. When you kind of know the system, you can kind of rattle off the stuff, right? You can rattle off all the aspects of it. You can talk about these things. But the power is really in the receiver, whoever is receiving the information, for them to take it in and decide for themselves, does this feel true? And part of the way you do that is by practicing it, right? It's praxis, right? You learn something, you get a theory, and now you have to go and see what works for you. I can tell you what I think might work, but I can't know what your journey looks like, right? And I think, like, if you are somebody who is trying to understand yourself better, trying to love yourself more, trying to show up more authentically, and really feel good about that, then there's no substitute for actually like trying it out and then like retooling it and reconfiguring it and trying something new next time. That's how it works, right? I mean, I think about that with like my authority as a manifesting generator is or is emotional authority. It's called creative authority in quantum human design. And so I have to sleep on it. Now, in theory, I would tell people, you gotta, the way they talk about it is like, you have to wait through your emotional wave, right? You have to kind of wait until you hit a down phase in your wave. And if you don't know what that is, then maybe track your moods. I'm not doing that. Like, I'm not going to do that. And so
Manifesting generator. There is no
yeah,
slowdown.
come on. No, I will sleep on it. I'll give you that. But I'm not tracking my moods. Like, I'm just not willing to do that. And so my experimentation is like, well, how long do I wait? Like, how do I know? Right? If I'm not tracking my moods and I'm only every so often in a bad mood, then, how long am I supposed to wait? And I can't know that unless I'm trying it. Right? So I think that that's such an important part about human design. It's interesting to hear like some people talk about it like it's really like you got to follow this rule, or this is exactly how it is and this is the truth. And I don't feel that way. I feel like it is something that is here to help us and support us in living our full expression. And it gives us a roadmap to try a new way of being, to get out of conditioning maybe that we're holding on to, and to explore like, what if that's not true for me? What if that's not actually who I am? And that's where the power of it is for me.
Absolutely. Yeah, I have come across teachers, students, and peers in this space where I see that like super rigid, prescriptive, the definitive book of human design, or else,
Right.
Ra's word over nothing, like over
Yeah.
everything. And it's it is what it is. It's a copy paste of colonialism. It's a copy paste of why so many of us are traumatized from religious spaces. It's capitalism, it's white supremacy, right? And so we have to I don't think we can say this enough, with any modality, be in our bodies and use our discernment.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's unfortunate. I get it though, and I've been there. I
Right.
want a playbook as well.
Yeah.
I want a script. I want a playbook. I want somebody to tell me what my next step should be. I want to be able to stay in some fantasy space where everything feels good and lovely and I'm healed and I'm fixed. I get it. But unfortunately, and maybe fortunately, that is not where we are. And so we have to notice that, see it for what it is, and then unlearn it. And if we use human design through the lens of deconditioning, which it teaches, I think it's possible. It means it's like letting go of this either or mentality and realizing the complexity of using a tool, but not letting it define you. Yeah.
Yeah, those are such great points. And I feel like I've always kind of been, I've been on my own journey with human design for probably like 5 years now. And I feel like I've always been I'm like waiting for it to like let me down or disappoint me, right? I'm waiting to like see where it's like, this is colonial, or right? Like these kinds of things that I have my own set of beliefs around. And I think that I found the right teacher for me. And I think that like I've done enough of that work aside from human design that I can use the tool in a way that feels um, more, I don't want to use the word progressive because I'm not talking about it in terms of like a political thing, but it feels like it is a step beyond, right? It's an evolutionary sort of thing. And so I think it can help guide us out of some of those things, right? Like, I mean, even if you just think about the idea of like the hustle and grind mentality, like that all is very like colonial, capitalist, white supremacist mentality. And human design says, absolutely not. Like you, like, no, like that doesn't work for anyone, not even generators who, or manifesting generators who are designed to like really be the engine or the fuel, right, of progress. But even them, right, it's not a hustle grind, like we shouldn't be doing that. So I think it is a tool that is expansive enough to hold all different types of imaginations about what we could possibly get to, right, in terms of our life as humans, right, as humanity, how we could evolve. Like I think it can hold all of that, but we have to be willing to let go of the rigidity of of implementing a system and really see it as this is a mirror for you to understand yourself in a different way, right? And it does give you a pathway, but it's your pathway. And there are a million pathways, right? There are as many pathways as there are people and then some. So yeah, I mean, I love that. Like, yes, we're on the same page about that. And I love that. So, okay, here's another question for you. Becky, wait, should I let you jump in because I'm like totally monopolizing Sarah?
It's totally fine. No, the only comment or thought like rambling around my head is like sometimes even when you follow your strategy and authority and you check in with your body and you do the thing and it doesn't work out or you get into it and it's like, oh, this is awful. Um, I think like some people's tendency would be like, oh, I shouldn't have followed that or I let myself down or whatever. When it can feel like you might have just been led into a different lesson you needed to learn. Like, how can you look at that situation and see what's the other lessons? Like, aside from human design, like, what am I learning from this situation? So, yeah, I've heard you say that to projectors before when you were doing readings. Like, that doesn't mean that every time it's a yes and you get invited in and you say yes and whatever, that it's going to be like perfect.
Mm-hmm.
Like because I think there's probably a tendency to people to think like Sarah was saying, just tell me exactly, like I just need to know exactly how to make decisions to like align my life so that everything is great. And it's like,
Mm-hmm.
oh, so you could have just stayed on the other side if you came for everything to be great all the time.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Right.
Like this is the bad place and we're trying to figure out how to get out of it. I don't know. I love that show, so I just had to use it somehow. But that's my only thought is like sometimes it's an invitation, it's a yes, like up and down, and it's still not a good situation, or it's still kind of a difficult thing to move through. And that's when you have to like lean on your other belief systems to sort of guide you out of it. That's all I got.
That was good. And it's very true and it's true for all people and all types.
Yep.
Your authority is important, but it doesn't necessarily mean it's going to go great. Sometimes, yeah, the yeses are lessons and it's uncomfortable, but I feel like for me, when I've had situations like that where it's like a hell yeah, like, and it's like I waited long enough and it was always a yes and all of that kind of stuff. That when it goes bad, I can see on the other side of it like what it was about for me.
Yeah.
I can see the growth that happened through it. While uncomfortable, was an important part of my journey. And so I think, what I would say to people who are like did I get it wrong? Like maybe you did, but maybe you didn't, right? Maybe you thought it was a yes and it wasn't, but maybe it really was a yes and maybe it was for your growth.
Yeah. Yeah. Good point.
Yeah. Okay, Sarah. So I want to bring up a little bit of a challenging perspective a little bit. Um, so I have a ton of like love and compassion for projectors. And I will say that sometimes projectors get a bad rap. Sometimes there can be feelings, from other people who are in relationships with projectors that there's like a micromanaging kind of situation or a control, like wanting to control everything, or even having really high standards, like really like thinking like, okay, well, we got to
Not
do,
not you, Sarah, but that is a such a
yeah,
projector thing. Very high
have
standards.
like we got to do A plus work all the time, right? Like we really need to reach our potential, and I can understand where all of that stuff comes from. But I would love to hear your perspective on that. What do you see from your point of view as a projector when it comes to some of the, negative things that people may think about projectors? Or the other one I'm thinking of that's coming to mind is like talking too much, saying
Mm.
too many things, right? Being too like sharing too much, or like that's the perception. I'm not saying that that's what's happening, but there can be a perception that it's like the person won't stop talking, or they like share everything that they know and they haven't been asked. Some of these perceptions, like how do you understand that from the point of view of a projector?
Um, every single human is gonna have those more shadowy aspects, and I think I can see in my life where those shadows have absolutely shown up for me. Those, I guess, reflections of a projector on the more critical side have for sure shown up in my life. I think um, a few, multiple things are coming in, so let me find a way to organize. Um, the first thing is most of those critiques where they are true for me are in very intimate interpersonal relationship, right? So like not so much in a work setting, not so much in a community setting, not even really so much in a familial setting, but like relationship dynamics, romantic dynamics, or like living dynamics, like if I'm in the same household, right? Um yeah, 1000%. The closer I am to someone, the more I'm tapped into their energy, right? Like whether projectors want to or not, it's like we're constantly reading a room, a person, the energy, the system, and it can feel so exhausting to have someone super close to you and you can see so clearly if you would just do this thing, if you would just take this step, if you would just take care of yourself, or and then because it's home, right? Because you're in your home, because you're in such an intimate dynamic, you want to drop your walls, you want to drop your filter, you want to drop it all. And so then it's like, sure, you see it all, you want to drop your walls, you're wanting to drop your filter. And so it's like this constant nagging, controlling, micromanaging impulse. And so if we want to be in relationship, if we want to share homes with folks, sure, right? Create spaces where you can drop the walls. I'm a 2-4, so that two side of things means even when I'm living with folks, I've got to, have my own space. I've got to be able to have those places to completely drop the filter. But being in community, being in relationship means, still caring for those folks right beside us, and That's where I find it to be the most difficult. I can point to many relationships in my past where I've had this awareness of I'm doing it again. I'm giving unsolicited advice. I'm micromanaging. I'm controlling. And so, yeah, the surrender there for me, the biggest lesson has been with the people closest to me. Um, and I've come a long way, and it's doable, and it's freeing to drop. It's freeing for the people around you. It's freeing for yourself to surrender to letting folks have their own journeys, letting folks make their own choices. And if in that spaciousness, in that loosening of the grip, in that letting go of control, they turn to you. And maybe they don't, but more often than not, they will turn to you and receive the advice you have and receive the wisdom. But we all know that when we're forced or pushed or um, expected to learn something quicker than we're ready for, it's just not going to land. And so, yeah, for me, the first, yeah, it's more difficult in my intimate relationships, in romantic dynamics, or in like a living space. I'm very particular with my things and the flow of a room, and yeah, sharing space and letting folks do things their own way. It can be challenging. And the talking too much thing, the sharing too much thing, I think I might have swung the complete opposite way. I think I think that I can, and this is more so coming from like inner child, familial dynamic wounds. I just learned to like really blend into the background. I learned to really stay in observation mode until I am directly asked a question. And when I am directly asked a question, I feel so seen and invited in. But sometimes, for me, and this could also come back to like what definition you may or may not have in your throat too. For me, I have been trying to, if something comes to my throat, if something wants to be expressed, whether whether I feel like I've been asked a question or not, there's a difference in giving unsolicited advice and expressing yourself. And so I've been trying to, for sure, wait for the invitation on advice and guidance and leadership. But if there's something that I need to express that's, coming from that place of like authenticity or needing something to be heard, to not shut that off and to speak up and to share. Because part of being seen and being able to be seen is putting yourself out there in that way and
Mm-hmm.
vocalizing. And so, but I have been around for sure projectors who are just constantly giving unsolicited advice, unsolicited therapy. Hey, have you tried this? Hey, have you heard of this? And that's exhausting to be around. And again, for me, that's more so in a one-on-one relationship dynamic. But I've seen that in group settings with projectors, and so I know that potential is there as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's interesting because it's interesting to hear you talk about like especially the holding yourself back a little bit until you're directly asked, because I feel like when we've been in person together, that is something that I notice about you, but it isn't, I wouldn't have thought that like it was maybe like from, childhood stuff. Um, there was like you have this like ease about you in the way that you speak, and so and when you talk and when and then when you're called upon, right, when somebody says, when I turn and say like, Sarah, what do you think about this, like the most profound thing comes out of your mouth that nobody has talked about, nobody has thought about, nobody has looked at it that way. And I think that's like really the power of a projector, who is not really struggling to feel seen or heard, but is comfortable with playing kind of the role. That's how I see you. So I don't know what it feels like to you, but it feels like you can sit back and just let people let the man gens like get it all out, right? Like let them just like spew all their ideas, like put it all on the table, right? Go in 40 different directions. And then here comes the projector, Sarah, like, oh, this is what you're trying to do, or this is how I see it, or this is how these things go together. I think like that is such a beautiful quality that you have, specifically you. And I think that it is a high expression of a projector where you can sit kind of comfortably, let people just do their process, and then come in and say, this is what I see, and this is how you can get there, right? As opposed to trying to say, like, this is how you should do it, or this is the direction you should go, or whatever. But it feels like there's a difference between telling people what to do and guiding them to fulfill their own ideas or to move along on their path in their way, right? There's a difference between what you want and helping somebody achieve what they want.
Mhm.
Does that make sense to you?
It absolutely does. And in the same way that sometimes it's a challenge for me in certain settings, it's a gift in others, right? Like when I'm with you two in person, I feel so seen. I feel so invited. And so I can just be in the observation and the flow. And I trust that you will ask me questions and I trust that you will invite me in. And so it is comfortable and it is easeful and it is lovely. And I am in my strategy and I am in my flow. So absolutely in that space, it feels like a gift. It feels like a strength. It feels like something I can lean into and lean on. It preserves my energy to be able to do that, to sit back and observe. And then, there are other spaces um, where I hold back, and where there are things that need to be expressed, or there are points of views that I want to be seen in, and I'm not feeling that ease and I'm not feeling that flow. And so, how do I still show up in my authenticity, even in spaces where maybe I don't feel that invitation? Because it's not, um, I don't know that it's possible or even that it's a goal of mine for 100% of the time that I'm only surrounded by community that I can be that version of myself in. Back to our point of like sometimes following your intuition leads you into spaces that are a little bit more challenging, or there is a different lesson. If I was just 100% of the time in invitation and ease and flow, I don't know that I would grow much or change much. And isn't the fundamental nature of our reality change?
Mm-hmm.
So I love that reflection, and I do feel that ease and that flow in most spaces in my life. I would say most. I have really cultivated and nourished community, friendships, relationships where most of the time I'm in invitation, most of the time I'm in flow, most of the time I'm in ease. And then there are other spaces and other lessons and other emotions that I have to move in spaces where maybe I don't. Um, yeah, and I think that's where more of the um yeah, those tougher emotions, right, come up.
Mm-hmm. And it's such a beautiful point, that to kind of take us to an earlier point that like even if you're like 90% of the way there, right? You're doing the damn thing. Like you're living your strategy and authority, you're feeling good in your strategy and authority, that there's still going to be places that challenge you because that's how we learn more about ourselves, that's how we grow, that's how we, expand, change, show up more authentically, whatever it might be. Um and there's nothing wrong with that. Like that's actually perfectly right, like I really do take the perspective and I know sometimes people give me shit for this, that like we're always doing it right, like we're always doing life right. And it may not be comfortable and it may be hard, and there may be really challenging lessons in there that we need to learn about ourselves and about other people and relationships and things like that. But that, you know, we're doing the best that we can. And like, you don't need to do more than that, right? Like, you do your best, look at yourself, you make changes if you want to, if you feel like it's supportive of you. But like, everybody's doing okay. Like, I mean, and okay, like I said, people like my husband in particular gives me crap about that. He does not agree with that statement. And there's a reason why I can hold that place. But yeah, I think, it makes life a little bit more interesting if you're not always in flow. If things aren't always easy for you. You learn what you're made of. You learn how to navigate. You learn how to switch things up. You learn how to, I'm going to be a little bit different in this situation than I am over here, right? And that tells you about yourself. Becky, any thoughts?
Um, no, I mean, for me, I think like I always say this, like human design and knowing people's human design really helps me like show up better in relationships. It helps me like have compassion, more compassion for, dynamics that we have in relationships. You know, some of the closest people to me are projectors. Like our dad is a projector, and my entire life, like I just got used to him sitting back and just observing everything and being like, "What do you have anything to say? Like what?" you know. Uh, um, and then I have, my son, my stepson. He's an Aries projector, and I'm trying my best to like, he gets very frustrated like with simple things or just the way other people are, and why can't, he do it this way, or why can't you, be like this person. He's very like in that teenage, I want the world to be a certain way, and I'm going to tell you exactly how that should be. Like, I'm trying to teach him, like, sometimes you should just sit back and observe things. But yeah, for me, I think a lot of human design is really just about gathering compassion for myself, gathering compassion for others, and for like how relationships and community sort of work. So I guess, my question would be like, how impactful has like knowing I can ask both of you, like knowing human design and knowing how like the people around you and the relationships, like how has it changed sort of how you look at others and people in your life to know their human design?
Sarah, would you like to share what you think about that?
Yeah, I think knowing other projectors is such a sweet, sweet experience for me. Again, that mirror. And so when I, meet another projector or find out someone else is a projector, there's a really lovely openness and invitation amongst projectors that I appreciate. And then especially within like collaborative, creative, more workplace settings, it's super helpful if I know people's human design. Um, but even within that, I like to ask a lot of questions and make sure that their human design resonates with them, that they feel seen in that, and not just make assumptions or start relating to someone based off their human design. I like to hear how the parts of human design that really resonate for folks work for folks. And then it's really nice to be like, oh, okay, so your emotional wave works for you this way. So let me make sure that I'm not, forcing urgency or needing a decision right now. So that's really lovely in a creative working kind of collaborative space. Yeah, but I think not making assumptions based off of knowing someone's type and staying curious is really helpful.
I agree with all of that. And I think for me, because I coach using human design, I meet lots of people, right? And I know their chart. And I think it really helps me to uh, understand behaviors in a compassionate way. I mean, I agree with you, Becky. I feel like it is a tool that really does cultivate compassion, if you're open to that. And I am, I'm driven, I think, by compassion. It's something I've explored for a while now, and I'm trying to embody. And so I think knowing people's human design helps me to see and love them even more, and see and love them even through things that maybe behaviors or ways of being or ways of thinking that maybe other people don't love as much, or are more judgmental towards. And so I love that about it. I love that it gives me that window, to really deepen my compassion and understanding for others. But okay, so my last question for you, Sarah, thank you so much for entertaining all of my questions. So many questions. My last question for you, it's twofold. So I want you to answer for just sort of generally for projectors, and then for you specifically. What is why do we need a projector in our life? When can we really call on projectors to be their sort of, to show up in their power and in their wisdom? Like, who needs a projector in their life? Why do we need projectors in our life? And share for like everybody, and then for you, like, why do we need you in our life?
Oh my goodness. Oh, if you are in a spot where your thoughts and feelings feel super overwhelming and there's just so much to hold, so much to consider, it all feels super complex, and you're just wanting to feel seen, heard, and understood in that, and then be given a perspective of it could really be this simple. If you're looking for like an action step, a way to put one foot in front of the other, a way to organize the overwhelm, a way to to have space for the complexity and feel seen in that, but then be shown pathways, possibilities, opportunities for how you could move through it. I think that's the gift of the projector, to be able to see really clearly the person in front of them, the experience, um, and then to be able to hold that and also say, um, here's a simple way forward. Um, here's a more easeful way forward. Um, or if there's just like an area of interest that you have and there's a projector in your life who studies that thing or knows that thing, they can explain it to you in a way that's clear and concise and direct and super helpful. Me personally, um, I am someone who has been willing time and time and time again to move through the depth of grief and come out of the other side with lessons and wisdom. Um, And so right now I'm feeling very called to stand at that threshold in that liminal space with folks and say, I know it's heavy. I know you're hurting. Um, but the sun is going to come up tomorrow, um, and spring will come shortly, and winter will then be right around the corner again, and I'll still be here standing at the threshold with you and in that space in between. And in that space, be able to say, and this is what I've learned, and this is the wisdom that I have in a very grounded, practical, clear way. Um, I think I have a gift of taking really complex, difficult topics and um, communicating them in a way that can be understood, acted upon. And I do that while showing up complete and whole. And, I can be in the midst of sadness and grief myself and show up in that sadness and grief with the folks around me, right? Just because I've learned the lessons and I've gathered the wisdom does not put me on any sort of pedestal or any sort of place where I'm any less human. And so I can sit in that space with somebody and alongside someone, not above it. Um, yeah.
It's really beautiful. I'm very grateful for you, Sarah.
Same.
Thank you for sharing all of this and sharing your wisdom with us and sharing your perspective and your point of view. And I think it will be really impactful for other projectors to hear from you and to think about themselves through your story and your experiences. And I'm really grateful to you for sharing those with us and sharing, some of your life experiences with us. If people want to connect with you, to invite you into be their guide, if you will, whether it be in grief or something else, how can they connect with you?
Yeah, I'd love for folks to go to my website, which is intuitiveempowerment.net. Check out more about me, check out my beliefs and my values, and if everything's there to be able to book a service. But really, I'd like to just point people towards like shooting me an email from there. Um, Otherwise, I've been trying to put a lot of my reflections and my writing on Substack. So intuitivempowerment.substack.com. And the tendency in my past has been to send people directly to Instagram. Those two spaces are my preference, email, Substack, but I do also have an active Instagram at intuitive.empowerment, and I'm open to messages, follows, and connecting there as well.
Lovely. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Becky, any final words from you?
I mean, Sarah's just magical. As many people in this, as a few people in this space, I came to her as somebody who needed guidance and wanted to experience, some magical things. I've had hypnosis from Sarah. I've had tarot readings from Sarah. I have had just I've taken classes, like she offers classes. But I eventually forced her to become my friend. And um I just think that you're magical. And I think that, anybody who comes and works with and learns from Sarah and gets guidance from Sarah will walk away feeling completely seen, heard, and they'll have gotten just a little bit of her wisdom to use along their way. So cannot recommend Sarah enough.
Agreed.
So much.
Well, everyone, I think we'll call it there. Thank you again, Sarah, for joining us. And thanks for everybody who watched. And be sure to reach out to Sarah for guidance and support.
Yep, we'll have her info in the show notes.
See you in the next one.
See you next time. Thanks again for joining us on this episode of Human Design Diaries. We hope that you love this episode as much as we did. Please take whatever resonates with you and leave the rest. If you're ready to dive deeper, visit our website at soulalignedsisters.com, where you'll find a wealth of free resources to support your journey. In our store, you can request a free human design chart, purchase low-cost reports, or even book a personalized reading with Jill. Be sure to explore our blog's Human Design Library, filled with stories and insights to help you get aligned. And don't miss our free Introduction to Human Design workshop, available through the Soul Aligned Sisters online school. Whether you're just starting out or deepening your knowledge, there's something there for everyone. Stay tuned for more episodes as we continue to uncover the magic of human design. Until next time, stay aligned and keep living your most magical life.